first started, it was called the Comedy Channel, and
Right.
your competitor was MTV, and they had their own. It was called Ha Comedy or something like that, and
The Comedy Network.
Ha the Comedy Network. That was what it was. And you guys had a intense back and forth, going back, and then I guess eventually you guys merged and into Comedy Central, into what it is now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of my early lessons, and that was it, was never underestimate the competition. I walked into this and HBO didn't want to do a comedy network. Like, so there's no comedy networks in the world. Nobody's really up to anything. We started working on it. We worked for about 3 or 4 months, and then we made an announcement. We had a big breakfast in LA, comedians, and Michael Fuchs, the head of HBO, who, by the way, at the time was considered the most powerful man in Hollywood. I mean, this is the kind of guy, if I got in the elevator with him, I broke into a sweat. He was like the real deal. Anyway, he makes this giant announcement about the comedy, how great Comedy Channel was going to be, before we launched. And I'm thinking, oh man, I hope this works because
That's a lot of pressure.
he's putting us right on the line. But the interesting thing is, I fly back from LA, right, the next day, and I get back, and MTV Networks has just put out a press release. And the press release says, we're going to start a comedy network too. This was one day later. And here's the name of it. And here's what, and I'm thinking, oh man, are you kidding me? It's obvious what happened. They just didn't want to let, suddenly they said, oh my gosh, maybe we're missing an opportunity. We better just get in there. So they did. They launched 6 months after we did. And then we went head to head for 6 months, and they called it the Comedy Wars. The press was having the time of their lives. Like, Hollywood Reporter and Variety and Rolling Stone did a big article on it. They were just tickled pink, because here were these two huge companies going head to head with these comedy networks, both of which weren't very good at the time. They had just launched. I mean, I thought look, with all due respect to our effort, we were getting better. We started out kind of crappy, but we were really getting better. And suddenly we got an audience, and suddenly we got programming that people want to watch. Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Almost instantly got noticed as an innovative piece of television comedy that wouldn't have showed up anywhere else if it weren't for Comedy Channel, right? I mean, it wasn't going to NBC, wasn't going to HBO, right? Nobody would put that on. But we put it on, and suddenly the thing's like a cult hit. And let me tell you, we were waving that around the first 6 months saying, if you think there's nothing here, check this out.
Yeah.
And we had some other stuff too. We were putting stuff on, but that's what the early months were like. It was just, hoping we'd get through it. And I thought by the end of the year, it was around December, by the end of the year, after fighting with these guys for 6 months, that we were winning. We had better ratings. We had a bigger audience. We had, I thought we had more buzz and better programming. And then I get a phone call. We're merging. Now, that wasn't my idea, as you can imagine. That was the guys at the top, the head of HBO and the head of Viacom, got together and said, look, we're just going to kill each other and there'll be no comedy networks. Why don't we just merge them? And they said, okay, let's merge them. And that's what they did. And they fired a lot of people on both sides, and they threw me and the head of programming from the other comedy network, in a room and said, you guys figure it out. What you need, what you're going to do, what you're going to call it. We weren't allowed to call it Comedy Channel or Ha. We had to come up with a new name. And I tell that story in the book too. But we did it. We figured it out. And it was almost harder doing the merger than it was doing the original launch, because you had two completely different groups of people, two different cultures, two different, basically, senses of humor, that they were bringing to the original efforts. And we had to figure out where we were going to meet. Were we going to meet in the middle or one side or the other? What were we going to do? The good news is all those guys from Ha, by the time we merged, they were as committed to seeing a comedy network succeed as we were. So it worked. And another thing I didn't put in the book that I'll say here is that there were a lot of whispers by the guys who put the merger together that Comedy Central rather, was not going to last a year, that it just was going to go down. But I was hell bent on making sure that didn't happen. I worked very hard to make sure that it succeeded. So did everybody else.